For words, that was all it took to turn a routine awards gripe into an internet mess. Not a shouting match. Not a scandalous leaked recording. Not even a direct attack from a longtime enemy. Just a public defense that landed so badly it ended up reopening every criticism Claressa Shields has been trying to outrun for months. And the wild part is, the person who lit the fuse was supposed to be helping her. Papoose stepped forward like he was about to correct the record, protect Claressa Shields, and remind people why Claressa Shields belongs in every serious conversation about elite athletes. Instead, the post detonated in reverse, and before social media could even catch its breath, Funky Dineva had a fresh stage, a fresh target, and a fresh excuse to say everything people knew would set the internet on fire. If you thought this was just about one BET award, slow down, because the award was only the trigger. The real story is why a defense of Claressa Shields became another referendum on Claressa Shields herself, why Papoose made the backlash louder instead of smaller, and why Aya Wilson's win ended up sitting in the center of a much bigger conversation about likability, branding, gender politics, relationship baggage, and the dangerous difference between being accomplished and being embraced. By the end, you may not even think the biggest issue was the trophy. Because let's start with the obvious part. Claressa Shields is not some fringe athlete begging for recognition. Claressa Shields is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. Claressa Shields is one of the most decorated names in women's boxing. Claressa Shields built a résumé that most athletes would trade their whole career for without thinking twice. When Claressa Shields enters a room, the accomplishments arrive first. That is record. That is history. And if this conversation were only about in-ring achievement, Papoose would have had a much easier time making his case. But public life is rarely that clean, and that is where everything started bending. Aya Wilson won the BET Sportswoman honor, and Aya Wilson had the kind of year that makes those wins easy to defend. Aya Wilson's supporters were ready with receipts, and many of them saw no robbery at all. Public reaction quickly split into three lanes. One side argued that Claressa Shields had every right to feel overlooked. Another side said Aya Wilson was a completely worthy winner and the outrage was misplaced from the beginning. Then there was the loudest lane of all, the lane that did not stay on sports merit for more than 5 seconds before it swerved into personality, history, and public image. That swerve is where Papoose made a difficult moment much worse. His intention looked simple on the surface. He wanted to champion Claressa Shields. He wanted to publicly signal that Claressa Shields should have gotten the respect he believes Claressa Shields earned. Maybe he also wanted to reassure Claressa Shields that somebody in her corner would say it out loud. But in the internet age, intention is only the opening scene. Impact writes the rest of the movie. And the impact of that defense was brutal. Instead of moving the conversation toward Claressa Shields' excellence, the post pulled people right back into every unresolved feeling they already had about Claressa Shields, about Papoose, about how their relationship began, and about why the public seems so quick to celebrate the achievements while still resisting the person. That is the part a lot of people miss. Online audiences do not simply react to the newest post in front of them. They react to a stack of memories. They react to old annoyance and prior headlines. They react to the version of a celebrity they have built in their own heads over time. So when Papoose tried to turn the spotlight toward injustice, a lot of viewers were already standing there with an entirely different script in hand. They were not asking, did Claressa Shields deserve more respect? They were asking, why does every public defense of Claressa Shields somehow end up sounding like another campaign for validation? Why does every attempt to elevate Claressa Shields seem to invite another avalanche of side conversations that have nothing to do with boxing and everything to do with optics? That is where Funky Dineva entered with perfect timing. During his June 30th livestream, he did what commentators who understand internet momentum always do. He found the softest point in the story and pressed on it until it became the story. He did not need to defeat Claressa Shields in the ring of facts. He needed to define the emotional frame. And his core argument was simple enough to travel fast. This is not mainly about whether Claressa Shields is qualified. This is about whether the public likes Claressa Shields enough to care when Claressa Shields loses. That idea spread because it is uncomfortable, sharp, and easy for people to project onto every part of public life. Now, to be fair, there is a reason that argument hit as hard as it did. People have seen less accomplished public figures win bigger opportunities because they were easier to market, easier to root for, easier to imagine in brand campaigns, easier to post, easier to celebrate, easier to defend. Likability has always had a shadow power that talent alone cannot fully defeat. In offices, in entertainment, in sports, in politics, people often move mountains for the person they enjoy before they move a chair for the person who merely deserves it. That truth is ugly, but pretending it does not exist will not make it disappear. Still, that same argument becomes dangerous when it starts acting like likability is the only lens that matters. Because then the public stops evaluating excellence and starts grading personalities for comfort. That is how greatness gets flattened. That is how women, especially black women, end up carrying double and triple standards that many men never have to survive. A man can be abrasive, chaotic, loud, reckless, arrogant, and somehow still get framed as passionate, competitive, or misunderstood. A woman can be ambitious, outspoken, defensive, proud, and suddenly she is exhausting, difficult, or impossible to support. Many viewers recognize that double standard immediately, and that is part of why this debate kept growing instead of cooling off. But Funky Dineva did not stop at public image. He went further, and this is where the conversation started splitting for a different reason. Once criticism moved from branding and behavior into appearance, femininity, and personal digs, a lot of people felt the argument lost its footing. It is one thing to say a public figure is oversharing, chasing the wrong image, or damaging their own brand. It is another thing entirely to start dragging how that woman looks, dresses, or presents herself as if physical mockery is meaningful analysis. That is when commentary stops sounding surgical and starts sounding personal. And once that line gets crossed, some of the audience no longer hears a serious critique. They hear a performer chasing blood in the water. That matters because the larger point could have stood on its own. There was already plenty to examine without going low. Claressa Shields has had a complicated public journey because Claressa Shields is not only selling victories. Claressa Shields is also selling a version of herself to audiences who reward consistency. One of the hardest things for any public figure is deciding which parts of themselves to commercialize and which parts to keep protected. If viewers feel they know too much, they become overfamiliar. If they feel they know too little, they call you distant. If you reveal strength, some call you inspiring. If you reveal hunger, some call you desperate. Celebrity branding is a trap disguised as a ladder, and Claressa Shields seems to step into that trap more often than some of her supporters want to admit. This is where the relationship factor becomes impossible to ignore. Whether fair or not, Claressa Shields and Papoose do not enter public conversations as two blank names. They arrive carrying the shadow of Remy Ma, the gossip that followed the start of the relationship, and the labels that social media attached early and never fully let go. Mistress, side chick, entanglement, homewrecker. People can argue all day about what is accurate, incomplete, or weaponized, but the internet rarely waits for legal precision before deciding what version of a story it likes best. For a lot of commenters, the romance itself became a character witness, and not a helpful one. So every time Papoose jumps online to defend Claressa Shields, he is not just speaking as a supportive partner. He is also reminding people of the relationship timeline they already think they understand. And that may be the cruelest part of this whole mess. Papoose probably believed his voice would add stability. For years, Papoose built a reputation as measured, loyal, and dependable. He was often viewed as the calm one, the stand-up husband, the steady presence. That image carried weight. But when a public figure with that kind of image suddenly appears in a debate that already feels messy, the stakes change. If the defense is persuasive, it can calm the room. If it feels emotional, biased, or poorly timed, it can have the opposite effect. In this case, a lot of people looked at Papoose and did not see a disciplined advocate. They saw a man amplifying a grievance that many viewers were never going to validate in the first place. Once that happened, the actual award almost became background noise. The discourse turned into a larger indictment of strategy. Why was this the hill to die on? Why force a comparison that would inevitably drag Aya Wilson into a crossfire she did not create? Why make it sound like honoring Aya Wilson automatically meant disrespecting Claressa Shields? And why keep pushing public battles that seem to produce more resentment than sympathy? These are the questions that started taking over the timeline, and every one of them moved the conversation farther away from celebration and closer to fatigue. That fatigue is important. Public fatigue can be more damaging than outright hate because hate still means people are emotionally locked in. Fatigue means the audience has started folding your story into a pattern. It means they think they already know what comes next. It means the plot twist no longer surprises them, because they believe the brand has become predictable. When viewers say somebody is hard to root for, they are not always making a moral claim. Sometimes they are making a narrative claim. They are saying the emotional return on investment feels too low. They are saying every headline ends in the same argument, every defense becomes another debate, every post sounds like another attempt to wrestle the internet into giving approval it was never offering in the first place. And yet, even after saying all that, it would be dishonest to pretend Claressa Shields has no legitimate frustration. Claressa Shields has spent years doing what elite athletes are told will earn respect. Winning, training, sacrificing, dominating, and continuing to show up while entire industries still struggle to market women's combat sports with the same enthusiasm they show for men. Claressa Shields can look at her body of work and reasonably ask why mainstream recognition still feels selective. Claressa Shields can look at less accomplished people with smoother public images and wonder why the machine opens more doors for them. Claressa Shields can absolutely feel that the applause has often been smaller than the achievements demanded. But being right about under-recognition does not automatically make every public response effective. That is the tension at the heart of this story. A grievance can be real and still be communicated in the wrong way. A defense can come from love and still produce the wrong outcome. A critic can touch on an uncomfortable truth and still deliver it so cruelly that people reject the messenger. That is why this whole situation keeps spiraling. Nobody involved is operating in a clean moral lane. Papoose may be sincere, but sincerity is not strategy. Funky Dineva may be observant, but observation without restraint turns corrosive. Claressa Shields may be accomplished beyond dispute, but accomplishment alone does not control public emotion. Then there is the Laila Ali angle, which added another layer to the whole conversation. One of the sharper criticisms floating around this debate is that Claressa Shields has sometimes aimed at the wrong targets in public. Laila Ali still carries an aura that extends beyond titles. She represents legacy, polish, crossover recognition, and a kind of mainstream respect that many athletes spend a lifetime trying to touch. When people say Claressa Shields may have damaged doors by sparring with Laila Ali in the public imagination, they are not necessarily saying Claressa Shields must stay quiet forever. They are saying power in public life is not only about being the best. It is also about understanding where influence lives and how not to turn potential bridges into permanent standoffs. That criticism connects to the biggest branding question around Claressa Shields. What exactly is the public supposed to see first? Is Claressa Shields primarily the all-time great boxer who occasionally speaks her mind? Is Claressa Shields a larger lifestyle brand who also boxes? Is Claressa Shields trying to be the undisputed champion, the internet baddie, the outspoken truth-teller, the headline relationship figure, and the misunderstood underdog all at once? Because when a celebrity chases too many identities at the same time, the audience stops knowing which version is official. And confusion is expensive. It weakens the emotional core. It makes every new controversy feel less like an interruption and more like a feature of the package. This is the point where some people invoke the Beyoncé comparison, not because Claressa Shields and Beyoncé occupy the same lane, but because mystery still has value. Audiences destroy what they can overhandle. The more raw material you give the internet, the more the internet believes it owns you. Every caption becomes evidence. Every live stream becomes testimony. Every joke becomes a quote. Every defense becomes a referendum. Some public figures stay powerful because they understand that not every thought deserves a microphone. Some of the criticism aimed at Claressa Shields boils down to exactly that. She may be giving the public too much access to the parts of her life that are easiest to weaponize and not enough disciplined control over the image she most needs protected. But before this turns into a lecture aimed only at Claressa Shields, we also have to talk about audience appetite. Because the internet loves a woman it can admire from a distance, and it often punishes a woman who insists on being seen up close, flaws and all. There is a hypocrisy in the way people consume celebrity vulnerability. They demand authenticity until authenticity arrives in a shape they do not find elegant. Then suddenly the same crowd that begged for honesty starts asking for polish. The same audience that says, "Be real" will punish the realness if it lacks glamour. So while Claressa Shields may have made branding mistakes, the culture evaluating those mistakes is hardly innocent. That is why Aya Wilson's name became such an important mirror in this story. Aya Wilson winning the award was not the problem by itself. In many ways, Aya Wilson's win exposed the deeper issue. Aya Wilson fits the kind of public narrative that many people find easy to celebrate. Excellence paired with broad market appeal, visible dominance paired with a brand that feels inviting rather than combative. That does not mean Aya Wilson had it easy. It means Aya Wilson's public image currently meets the market at a more comfortable angle. When people defended Aya Wilson, they were not just defending a résumé. They were defending a kind of celebrity package that the mainstream knows how to reward. And that package difference is what turned Papoose's defense into such a miscalculation. The second he publicly framed the outcome as a wrong done to Claressa Shields, he invited the audience to compare not just statistics or accomplishments, but total emotional ecosystems. He opened the door for the public to say, fine, let's compare who each athlete is to the culture, to sponsors, to casual fans, to the broader entertainment machine. That is messier than a credentials debate, and it was always going to be harder for Claressa Shields to win online. The internet moved exactly how the internet always moves. Once the first wave hit, people started piling on with old clips, old grudges, old labels, old arguments. New viewers were introduced to the controversy through the harshest possible summaries. Neutral people became commentators. Commentators became judges. Judges became comedians. And that may be the most brutal part of social media. It converts unresolved complexity into repeatable shorthand faster than almost any person can correct it. That is why a single post from Papoose could widen into a full-scale discussion about whether Claressa Shields is chronically underappreciated or simply chronically mismanaged. At the same time, Funky Dineva benefited from saying the part that many people were already halfway thinking but were waiting to hear stated with confidence. That is often how viral commentary works. The most effective commentator is not always the one with the deepest insight. It is the one who recognizes what the audience is emotionally prepared to accept and then delivers it in a form sharp enough to repeat. His likability argument stuck because it gave the public a neat container for a messy feeling. It allowed people to say, this is not about merit, this is about connection. And once an audience believes it has found the cleanest explanation, it tends to squeeze every future event through that same frame. But I would argue that the cleaner explanation is not always the truer one. Claressa Shields is not merely dealing with a likability gap. Claressa Shields is dealing with an image conflict. She is dealing with a visibility problem that behaves like a paradox. She is visible enough for every flaw to trend, but not protected enough for every achievement to dominate. She is famous enough to attract non-stop commentary, but not universally beloved enough to receive reflexive grace. She is successful enough to threaten existing hierarchies, yet polarizing enough that some viewers feel more comfortable debating her attitude than honoring her legacy. That is a much more complicated trap than the simple phrase hard to like can capture. So where does that leave Papoose? In an awkward spot because the backlash also raised a question about his own role. Is Papoose helping Claressa Shields build a stronger public image? Or is Papoose unintentionally dragging Claressa Shields back into narratives she needs to escape? Is Papoose defending Claressa Shields? Or is Papoose functioning like a megaphone for problems better handled with discipline and silence? Support in private and strategy in public are not always the same thing. The internet does not grade love on intention. It grades performance on results. And the result here was obvious. The defense did not shrink the fire. It fed it oxygen. That does not mean Papoose meant harm. It means celebrity relationships are often terrible crisis management teams. Love is not objectivity. Loyalty is not messaging. If anything, the more emotionally invested somebody is, the easier it becomes for them to make a moment about proving devotion rather than winning the room. And once that happens, the audience senses it immediately. They stop hearing a measured case. They hear a partner fighting from the heart, and for a cynical internet, that rarely reads as persuasive. It reads as predictable. Meanwhile, Claressa Shields is left carrying the heaviest consequence, which is that every new public defense seems to reinforce the idea that Claressa Shields is trapped in a permanent struggle for acceptance. That is a dangerous image for any star. Great champions can survive being disliked. They can survive being polarizing. What becomes much harder to survive is looking like you need the audience to admit something it has already decided not to give you. Hunger can inspire. Visible hunger for validation can sometimes repel. And once viewers think a celebrity is arguing with the culture instead of rising above it, the culture usually gets louder. So maybe the most important question is not whether Claressa Shields deserved the award more than Aya Wilson. Maybe the deeper question is what version of Claressa Shields will ultimately last. Will the dominant story be the one written by records, medals, belts, and historic firsts? Or will the noise become so constant that every achievement has to fight through another layer of image drama before it reaches people? Because legacies are not only built by what happens in competition. They are also shaped by which narratives keep finding you when the competition is over. If Claressa Shields wants the broadest possible public embrace, the next move probably is not louder explanation. It is sharper discipline. It is deciding which lane truly belongs to Claressa Shields and protecting that lane with almost ruthless consistency. It is making sure that when Claressa Shields trends, the trend cannot be hijacked so easily by relationship discourse, online grudges, or side arguments about presentation. It is allowing fewer open doors into the parts of life that generate easy mockery and greater focus on the part that nobody can honestly take away. Excellence in boxing. And if Papoose wants to help, the help may look less dramatic than the internet expects. It may mean fewer public declarations and more private reinforcement. It may mean understanding that not every unfair outcome needs an instant public trial. It may mean recognizing that in some situations, the strongest defense is not the loudest one but the one that refuses to hand critics an entirely new headline. Because this time, the internet did not treat Papoose like a protector. It treated Papoose like the accidental architect of another drag session. As for Funky Dineva, his commentary will keep circulating because it tapped a nerve that was already exposed. Some people will say he nailed the root issue. Others will say he took a valid point and poisoned it with cruelty. Both readings can live at the same time. That is the nature of commentary built for virality. It often mixes perception with performance so tightly that separating the two becomes part of the spectacle. And that brings us back to where this all started. Not with a belt. Not with a trophy. Not even with the original criticism. It started with a defense. One that was supposed to uplift Claressa Shields but instead pushed her back into every unresolved public argument that follows her name. One that turned Aya Wilson's win into collateral conversation. One that gave Funky Dineva the opening to crystallize months of audience frustration into one viral thesis. A defense that proved, once again, that in celebrity culture, being correct about your talent does not guarantee you will be rewarded with the kind of affection that makes public battles easier to win. And that is the twist so many people missed at first. The award was never the whole story. The post was not the whole story. Even Funky Dineva's rant was not the whole story. The real story is the collision between achievement and image, between private loyalty and public strategy, between excellence and embrace. Claressa Shields remains one of the most accomplished athletes of her era. Aya Wilson remains a deserving award winner. Papoose remains the man whose attempt at support changed the conversation for all the wrong reasons. And the internet remains what it has always been. A place where one wrong move can bring every old opinion back from the dead and make it look brand new again. So now the question shifts to you. Did Papoose simply defend Claressa Shields the wrong way? Or did he reveal a bigger problem in how Claressa Shields is being presented to the public? Did Funky Dineva diagnose an uncomfortable truth? Or did he cross the line and hide cruelty inside commentary? And most of all, when a star as accomplished as Claressa Shields keeps ending up in the same kind of public storm, is that proof the audience is unfair, or proof the strategy keeps missing the moment? Let me know where you land, because this debate is bigger than one award, and judging by the way the timeline reacted, it is nowhere near finished.